So today we're answering the question, what built the pyramids? How were the pyramids built? And what are the pyramids for? This is, as we explore, and this is, I really enjoy discussing this material. It's a very interesting material. So this is from what's known as the Law of One, or the raw material, which is a compilation of messages from a channeled entity that claims to be an entity beyond space and time, that claims to have contacted the Egyptians, and in this particular session reveals how the pyramids were built and what they are for. Now, I really enjoyed, we've been doing a whole video series on this material because it's a research team that channeled this entity in the 1980s over a period of 3 years. And it's just absolutely fascinating. The information is fascinating. The story is fascinating. It ends with like a tragic death. So we're talking about this today. I made an intro video for the Law of One. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I highly recommend you do, because there's just so much to this story. It's always a challenge to put it in, to try and summarize it in every video. But even if you haven't seen it, that's fine. You can watch this video by itself, and it's going to be really good. And I will be giving my opinion as well with regard to the construction of the pyramids and what I think about this material. We'll be using logic and reason to examine this, seeing if it's real, if it's not, and also, of course, comparing it to our system, the Neogenian. So let us begin. Real quick before we do, hey, please like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. You get access to members-only videos every single week and all the members-only videos that have been released. Last week, the members-only video was The Secret Realm Beyond Quantum Mechanics, as we discussed the fundamental nature of reality that's beyond the quantum. Really good stuff. I love talking about that stuff. So if you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon or Tier 2 or higher on YouTube by hitting the join button to get access to all that. Also, be on the lookout for scams. There's a lot of scammers in the comments. Watch out for people saying that I have a WhatsApp or a Telegram or any of that stuff. That's not me. It's a scam. Don't fall for it. Also, there are a lot of people and groups out there that don't want this information out there. And so they spread a lot of disinformation and misinformation about me and our group. And, just keep an eye out. Use your head. Use reason. Don't fall for the BS. All right. Here we go. Let's begin. The secrets of the pyramids as revealed by an entity called Ra. We're going to start right away. So this is channeled information where Carla is being the channeler. So all the information, everything that we're going to be reading right now is a questioner and then Ra answering. So basically, to set the scene, you have Carla who's laying in a bed in a trance-like state who is channeling this entity Ra, and then you have an individual whose name is Don, who is a professor of physics and engineering, who is asking Ra questions. So this is let's jump right into this. So this is Don speaking, saying to Ra, I'm guessing that there are enough people who would understand what you're saying, interested enough for us to make a book of communications with it, and I wondered if you would agree to this, us making a book. And if so, I was thinking that possibly a bit of historical background on yourself would be in order. So basically Don is saying, hey, this is only the second session that they've channeled Ra. And basically Don is saying, hey, can we make a book about this? Because this is some amazing information. And if you think that that's a good idea, can you give us some information about your history? And this is how Ra is going to get into talking about its contact with the Egyptians and the building of the pyramids. So Ra basically replies, and I'll read the reply real quick. I am Ra, the possibility of communication, as you would call it, from the one to the one through distortion acceptable for meaning is the reason we contacted this group. So basically, Ra is saying, hey, the reason why I contacted you was to spread information from the one to the one, because we are all the one. Remember, this is the Law of One. So according to the Law of One, we are all one mind. And this is, so when one communicates with another, it's the one talking to the one. This is essentially in the Neogenian perspective. system, the absolute perspective. It's not exactly the same, but it's similar to that. So Ra continues, there are few who will grasp without significant distortion that which we communicate through this connection with this mind-body-spirit complex, referring to Carla, the person that's being the channeler. However, if it be your desire to share our communications with others, we have the distortion towards a perception that this would be most helpful. In other words, Ra says, hey, look, the reason why I contacted you guys was to get this information out there. So yeah, go for it. Probably not many people are going to understand it, but go for it. This is like the whole purpose, is to get information out. So Don then wants to ask the background of Ra for introducing people to what Ra is for the book. And so Don says, could you tell us something of your historical background, your earlier times in the illusion and the time state contact, possibly your incarnation on this planet that you spoke of before, and contact with earlier races on this planet? Then we would have something to start with in writing this book. And this is really interesting because this is eventually when Ra really soon here is going to talk about the Egyptians and the contact, because so what's interesting here is it's talking about your incarnation on this planet. So what it seems like, and my interpretation of this, is that Ra calls itself a social memory complex. So it's a group mind. It's not like a bunch of aliens on some planet. It's a group mind that no longer exists in this dimension and is communicating through the mind. And so for this group mind to go to a planet wouldn't mean like landing a spaceship. It would mean incarnating there. Because we are all eternal minds, eternal souls. In our system, we refer to them as zetas, an infinite fullness that voids to zero, a zeta or zetic mind. So Ra, if this material is real, would be a group mind, a collective mind, and could choose to have its component souls incarnate as bodies on a particular planet. So my interpretation of this is that Ra is a discarnate entity, an entity of mind, that when Ra says that it visited the planet, it's not meaning landing a spaceship, it means literally incarnating. And Don says, can you explain your incarnation on this planet that you spoke of before? And Ra replies, I am Ra. We aware that your mind-body is calculating the proper method of performing the task of creating a teach-learning instrument. Ra's basically saying, hey, we understand that you're trying to figure out the best way to create a book. Ra says, we are aware that you find our incarnate, as you call it, state of interest. We waited for a second query so as to emphasize that the time space of several thousand of your years creates a spurious type of interest. Thus, in giving this information, we ask the proper lack of stress be placed upon our experiences in your local spacetime. The teach learning, which is our responsibility, is philosophical rather than historical. So, and then it says, we shall now proceed with your request, which is harmless if properly evaluated. So remember, Ra's whole thing, as we learned in the last discussion, is that Ra wants to give this information to the world because Ra says they tried to give the information to the Egyptians, but the information got misinterpreted or distorted. So we saw even in the last session that Ra is super paranoid about any of this being misunderstood, because basically Ra is trying to correct that mistake of this being misunderstood. So Ra is very sensitive and paranoid for this information, that this information be understood correctly. So Ra is basically saying, hey, we understand that you're trying to figure out the best way to write a book. And we understand that you're interested in our incarnation on Earth. And it's saying, we want to emphasize that when we start getting into what happened, several thousands of years ago or more, it gets people interested, but for the wrong reasons. So Ra is saying, we'll tell you about this but don't put stress on this being important. They're basically saying we're here to give philosophical information on like what reality is, what existence is, what we are, where we are, why we're here. Not talk about like what happened thousands of years ago, not what happened historically. So Ra's saying like, okay, I'll answer your question. And it's harmless if you make sure not to make a big deal about this. And I think this is really interesting because this is often my position as well. When people ask like, oh, did Jesus really exist or something? I go, it doesn't matter if Jesus really existed. It matters at looking at what information was said and if it's good information or bad information, if something it's useful or if it's not useful. So people who get like obsessed with that stuff, it's okay. It's harmless. So if you like that sort of thing, that's totally cool. Nothing wrong with it. Kind of like Ra's saying, it's harmless, but as long as it doesn't become obsessive and you miss the message because you're so obsessed with like conspiracy theory or story. So anyway, I think it's really cool going into this where Ra's going to describe contact with the Egyptians and the construction of the pyramids. Ra's like, this is not important, but okay, I'll explain it to you. I'm really trying to give across philosophical information. But anyway, so, oh, by the way, I want to remind you that there's a lot of stuff we're not going to read because there's just so much information. You can read it all for yourself at lawofone.info. That's lawofone.info. You can read it all for free. We're not, going to read the whole thing. Absolutely not. There's too much information here. But anyway, so Ra's says we're now going to continue. Just, hey, don't make a big deal about this, but we'll answer your question. We are those of the Confederation who 11,000 of your years ago came to two of your planetary cultures, which were at that time closely in touch with the creation of the one creator. It was our naive belief that we could teach, learn. And by the way, Ra always says teach, learn, because for Ra, everything is one mind. So when you teach, it's also learning, and learning is teaching because everything is happening within a feedback loop. So anyway, it was our belief that we could teach, learn, or teach by direct contact, and the free will distortions of individual feeling or personality were in no danger, we thought, of being disturbed, as these cultures were already closely aligned with an all-embracing belief in the liveness or consciousness of all. So basically, Ra says, okay, we came to Earth, incarnated, and we naively believed that humanity was basically like going to understand this information because they were pretty aligned with the idea that reality is consciousness, or that they were in the right ballpark. Ra is basically saying they were like, okay, we see this race on Earth, we see, and they're in the right ballpark. Hey, it's probably a good idea to give them more information. That's what Ra is saying. So we came and were welcomed by the peoples who wished to serve. We attempted to aid them in technical ways having to do with the healing of the mind-body-spirit complex distortions through the use of the crystal, appropriate to the distortion, placed within a certain appropriate series of ratios of time-space material. Thus were the pyramids created. Now, we're going to get more into the pyramids in a minute, but one thing that I want to make clear is when Ra says distortion, Ra refers to everything as a distortion. Everything, basically. So for example, Ra refers to bodies as distortions, right? He says, oh, we want to heal mind, body, spirit complex distortions. So this would be like a body that is sick or ill, or the spirit that is sick or ill, or the mind that is sick or ill. So it's distorted in some way. But Ra will talk about so many things as being distortions, even sometimes, and the reason why is because Ra is trying to get across information that's Ra basically knows, like, okay, it's always going to be distorted in some way. We're trying to minimize distortions as much as possible to get as much truth as possible through. Anyway, Ra says, we found that the technology was reserved largely for those with the effectual mind-body distortion of power. This was not intended by the law of one. We left your people. So Ra basically says, we found out that what we were trying to do ended up being used by people who wanted power. the information we shared, the technology was used by the people who wanted power. And they said, we did not intend this to be, and so we left. And there's a lot more information here. It talks about that there was another group that worked in South America, another entity, another social memory complex that was working in South America. And it goes into more talking about contact in the 18th dynasty, contacting a pharaoh, and that, yeah, where is it here? Yeah, Akhenaten. And that they basically, long story short, because we don't have time, Ra contacted the Egyptians in another, I think in another channeled type way, contacted a pharaoh. The pharaoh decreed it as law, but then it got distorted by the priests. Once again, we don't have time to read it all because I want to get to the part on the pyramids, but you can check that out for yourself if you're interested on the website. So after describing that they contacted the Egyptians and that their message got distorted and no one understood it right and the priests messed it up, basically, Ra said, do you have any other questions for us? And Don says, yes, you mentioned that the pyramids were an outgrowth of this. Could you expand a little bit on this? Were you responsible for the building of the pyramids? And what was your pyramid? And what was your purpose of the pyramid? Ra says, I am Ra. The larger pyramids were built. And it's very interesting, by the way, Ra almost always says, I am Ra at the beginning, but sometimes, very occasionally doesn't. And it's always interesting to see if, because Ra later talks about negative entities that try and interfere with the communication or put false information in or kind of like hijack the channel. So it's always kind of curious, like, wonder if perhaps that was like a negative entity because it didn't start with I am Ra. By the way, I just want to clarify, it's very much up in the air whether this material is real or if it's a hoax made up, or if it's a manifestation of the channeler's collective unconscious, or the channeler's unconscious, which could be connected to the collective unconscious. So I just want to make that clear. When I read this material, I read it with you all as though it were real to kind of get information and you know, to play with the information and see what we can learn from it. But I just want to make it clear, I don't, it's not necessarily the case that I believe that this is real. It might not be. And especially when we start getting into stuff like this. So stuff like this, to me, you know, is very questionable. So, but let's see, let's continue. And I want to know what you think. So I do these live, by the way, and at the end of every live stream, I do a poll on if you guys think it's real, or if you think it's made up, or if you think it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. And so far, real and manifestation of Carla's unconscious are about tied, with hoax coming in close to that, but a little less popular. So I'm curious as we go along, I'll do another poll after this to see what you all think. And by the way, tell me in the comments, if you're watching a replay right now, tell me in the comments, tell me what you think, especially when you get to the end of this video. Tell me what you think after you hear the information, if you think it's real, if you think it's a hoax, or if you think it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. Want to know what you think? Tell me. It's very interesting to see. So anyway, Don says, hey, did you build the pyramid? Ra says, I am Ra. The larger pyramids were built by our ability using the forces of one. The stones are alive. And I love that. That's such a cool, I just love that. The way Ra speaks is very, very interesting. Ra says, the stones are alive, and I love that. It has not been so understood by the mind, body, spirit distortions of your culture. So whenever Ra says, just keep in mind, whenever it says mind, body, spirit distortions, he means people. Or I don't say he, Ra isn't a he, Ra would be a they, but they mean people. They're literally a they, they're a group. So it has not been so understood by the people or mind, body, spirit distortions of your culture. The purpose of the pyramids were two. So now Ra is going, before describing how the pyramids were built, which is really interesting, and I want to get into this. Ra is going to explain what Ra says is the purpose of the pyramids. And then later on, I'm going to give you my interpretation of a possible purpose for the pyramids as well. But anyway, this is what Ra says. First, to have a properly oriented place of initiation for those who wish to become purified or initiated channels for the law of one. So the first purpose, according to Ra, was a place of initiation for those wanting to reach and understand higher consciousness and understanding the truth of existence. That is, become purified or initiated channels for the law of one. Possibly maybe even like channeling information, stuff like that. So an initiatory area in a proper orientation. Second, we wished then to carefully guide the initiates in developing a healing of the people whom they sought to aid and the planet itself. Pyramid after pyramid, charged by the crystal and initiate, were designed to balance the incoming energy of the one creation with the many and multiple distortions of the planetary mind-body-spirit. In this effort, we were able to continue work that brothers within the Confederation had effected through building of other crystal-bearing structures, and thus complete a ring, if you will, of these about the Earth's, as this instrument would have us vibrate it, surface. So this is what they're basically saying, which is really interesting. They're basically saying they wanted to have the pyramids as an initiation chamber to train people, help people, raise people's consciousness, have them reach a higher consciousness. And second, to create kind of like this crystal technology in the pyramids and basically all across the world, that this would be done by other entities of what they call the Confederation in other locations of the world. They talked about one being in South America, I think. I don't know if they said the crystal thing was there, but contact was made in South America, Ra says as well. So basically Ra is talking about the pyramids as being this sort of hybrid of like having highly conscious individuals integrated with conscious technology using crystals that they wanted to have all over the Earth, so that eventually through this technology and interface with humans with a high level enough consciousness to be able to operate it, to create this some sort of ring across the planet, which they say would be for the purpose of healing the people and the planet. Now, Ra talks in a very, broad way. I think even in another place that we're going to read, Ra goes like, I don't know your language well enough to tell you what you're asking or something. Well, we'll see. It's interesting. But anyway, so when Ra says healing, it doesn't necessarily mean physical. I think it definitely can mean physical, but you always have to see a broad interpretation of what Ra means. It might also mean like healing in the form of creating unity or who knows. But I just want to put it out there that so interestingly, Ra says the purpose of the pyramids were twofold. One, to raise an initiatory environment to raise someone's consciousness, and then create this technology with integrating crystals, and then a highly conscious operator to operate them and have this ring around the planet eventually. Like that was the main goal. And apparently other social memory complexes were also trying to do this as well. So very interesting. Let's continue here. And we're actually going to go to now session 3, where we talks about the building of the pyramids, and we're going to get even more into this here. So in session 3, let's start with, we'll start down here. Remember, if you want to read all this, because we're just reading excerpts, there's too much information to read it all, and there's great stuff. So law-of-one.info if you want to read it all. So Ra says, because remember, this is the next session, so possibly the next day, because I think they did it every day in the beginning. So Don says, at the last session, we had 2 questions we were saving for this session. One having to do with the capstone of the Great Pyramid at Giza, and the other with the heavy blocks. and because, there's a lot of mystery surrounding how the pyramids were built. Like, they're very, very heavy. How were people able, there's a lot of mystery surrounding the pyramids. How were people able to move such heavy blocks? How were they able to create it in the amount of time that they had? How, there's so many mathematically precise elements to things that were created in Egypt. So it's like, how was it so mathematically precise? How were they? So there's a lot of interesting intrigue around the pyramids. Definitely a lot of intriguing mysteries surrounding the pyramids. So Don, the questioner, is asking Ra about how they were built. And so Don continues, I know these questions are of no importance at all with respect to the law of one, right? Because Don, I think, kind of knows that Ra's like slightly annoyed at having to explain this stuff when Ra wants to talk about the stuff that's actually important, according to Ra, which is understanding what we are, where we are, and why we are here. And by the way, this is only session 3 out of 180 sessions. So if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because we're going to go through a lot of this material, and it covers almost everything you can think of. From physics to tarot cards, from magic to probably quantum mechanics. It's really, really intriguing stuff, and from a very interesting perspective. Anyway, just subscribe, okay? Do the thing, and hit like while you're at it. Yeah, do that. So anyway, Don's like, hey, I know you're annoyed by this, basically, but it was my judgment, which you may correct, that this would provide an easy entry for the reader of the material. So basically, hey, I know it's not important, but hey, like, this would be an easy way to introduce people to this material, give them, talk about the pyramids, give some background. We are very grateful for your contact, and we will certainly take suggestions about how we should proceed with this. This is just one guess. Ra says, I am Ra. I will not suggest the proper series of questions. And this is also really interesting. So Ra really emphasizes this throughout the material, throughout the book. Ra's basically like, you're free to ask me whatever you want, but I'm not going to suggest anything to you. And I think this is sort of Ra's like really paranoid about because according to Ra, they're very not angry, but like they're trying to correct the fact that when they contacted Egypt, their message got all distorted by the priests and the people, and it got turned into, like religious stuff that wasn't helpful. So Ra's like, I'm not going to tell you what questions to ask. This is your prerogative as a free agent of the law of one, having learned and understood that our social memory complex, that we cannot effectually discern the distortions of the societal mind, body, spirit complexes of your people. We wish now to fulfill your, okay, so basically what Ra is saying is like, hey, I'm not going to suggest what you're asking or suggest questions. It's your prerogative as a free agent, because being a social memory complex, we don't really understand like what you people believe or what you're confused about. That's what, and it's so like this is the stuff. This is kind of the stuff that makes the law of one really interesting, because it's so cool to me, because it's like, yeah, that's exactly what some higher entity would say. So Ra is basically saying, we, as a social memory complex of 6th density consciousness, don't understand what you guys don't get. So you have to ask us, because we don't know why you don't understand this. So you have to ask the questions, basically, which is, I don't know. I find little things like that really interesting and really intriguing. And yeah, very fascinating. So we wish now to fulfill our teach, learning, honor, responsibility by answering what is asked. This only will suffice, for we cannot plumb the depths of the distortion complexes which infect your people. Basically, we don't know what the fuck is wrong with you guys, and why you guys don't understand this information. We don't get why you don't get this, basically. We don't know why you don't understand this. So you ask the questions, because we don't know why you're having a hard time with this. So the first question, Ra's still talking. The first question, therefore, is, and I don't know. I just love this, because again, you don't know if it's unclear whether it's real or it's a hoax or if it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. But either way, it's just almost, it's kind of funny to me and just really fascinating. With here you have Ra, which is kind of like annoyed because Don keeps asking about pyramids, and Ra's like, why are you talking about this? We're trying to impart information. And it's like, okay, well, I guess if you're writing a book, it's fine. It's an easy way to get people introduced to this. And then so Ra's basically like explaining about the capstone of the pyramids. And I just love this because Ra's like doesn't really know why this is a point of interest, but will answer anything that Don asks. So anyway, the first question, therefore, is the capstone. We iterate the unimportance of this type of data. I don't know. Do you guys find that funny or amusing as well, or is it just me? I don't know. I find it because I don't know. I think it's because I relate to Ra when people ask like things that it's like, well, it doesn't matter. We're here to understand what we are, where we are, why we're here, not like talk about I don't know, some really obscure thing that happened 20,000 years ago. But by the way, if you are interested in that stuff, I'm not ripping on you. That's great. There's a lot of interesting things to be interested in, but as long as one realizes that there is actual real information that needs to be understood to raise one's consciousness as well, like the philosophical side of it. And that's what we emphasize in the Neo-Genian. So anyway, so Ra says, all right, let's talk about this, but hey, we're going to say again, it's not important. The so-called Great Pyramid had two capstones. One was of our design that was of smaller and carefully contrived pieces of the material upon your planet, which you call granite. This was contrived for crystalline properties and for the proper flow of your atmosphere via a type of what you would call chimney. At a time when we as a people left your density, and see, I love when Ra says at a time when we as a people left your density. So Ra refers to like densities as levels of consciousness, like humans are third density, but Ra's trying to get them to the fourth density, which is very similar how we are trying to get humanity from self-awareness to hyper-awareness. It's not exactly the same. It's definitely not exactly the same, but you can see kind of like a general ballpark, some ideas that Ra seems to be touching on here, which are really important to things that we talk about. But anyway, I digress. At a time when we left your people's density, the original capstone was taken away and a more precious one substituted. It consisted in part of a golden material. This didn't change the properties of the pyramid, as you call it, at all, and was a distortion due to the desire of a few to mandate the use of the structure as a royal place only. Do you wish to query further upon this first question? So Ra's basically saying, when it comes to the capstone, we originally created one out of granite, but later it was replaced, after we left, it was replaced by your people that contained gold material to designate it as belonging to the royals only, which Ra did not intend for that to be. So Ra's basically saying, like, this is why Ra's pissed about how Ra tried to come and help, and then it got messed up because people who wanted power basically distorted everything. And okay, so I love this question here. So Don says, what do you mean by chimney? What was its specific purpose? And the reason why I love this question so much is because it's like Ra is like this other dimensional entity, sixth density being, and doesn't really know what humans don't understand or don't get, and is just there to answer any question. And Don asks, like, what do you mean by chimney? What was its specific purpose? Like as though it's something like, oh man, like super esoteric or important. And it's just a damn chimney. So Ra goes, there is a proper flow of your atmosphere, which, though small, freshens the whole of the structure. This was designed by having airflow ducts, as this instrument might call them, situated so that there was a freshness of atmosphere without any disturbance or draft. I don't know why I find that so funny. It's just because it's like, it was a hole. You know, I don't know. I find it funny. So then we go to the next question. How were the blocks moved? Now, this is the big question. Like a lot of people wonder, how were these blocks moved? So Don wants to know. This is very, very interesting. So Ra goes, I am Ra. And this is some cool stuff here. You must picture the activity within all that is created. The energy is, though finite, quite large compared to the understanding/distortion of your peoples. This is an obvious point well known to your peoples, but little considered. The energy is intelligent. It is hierarchical. Much as your mind-body-spirit complex dwells within a hierarchy of vehicles and retains, therefore, the shell or shape or field, and the intelligence of each ascendingly intelligent or balanced body, so does each atom of such a material as rock. When one can speak to the intelligence, the finite energy of the physical or chemical rock body is put into contact with that infinite power which is resident in the more well-tuned bodies, be they human or rock. So basically they're saying that there is this finite energy within everything, and when a being has reached a level of consciousness that allows that being to access their internal infinite energy. Okay, so you see the difference between the finite energy of the rock and the infinite energy of a highly high, and we're talking like a hyper-conscious individual, like, you know, that no human has achieved. They're saying that when you reach that level, that you're able to tap into one's infinite energy, you can have that energy access the finite energy of the rock. And again, this is really interesting because the parallels to what we talk about is interesting, because we as eternal minds are zetas, an infinite fullness that voids to zero. We're eternal systems of infinite energy, and everything around us is a localized expression of that energy. So, you know, you could call this as sort of like being composed, or you could call this as containing finite energy. We get to a semantic issue at this point, but you as an eternal mind or a zeta have access to your infinite energy rather than the space-time projection, which could be seen as like a wave packet almost. You could look, if anyone's familiar with quantum mechanics, you can kind of look at objects as wave packets. So Ra is basically saying some extremely conscious being can have their access the infinite energy within the finite energy of material items. Okay, so it says, with this connection made, when that connection is established, a request may be given. The intelligence of infinite rockness communicates to its physical vehicle, and that splitting and moving which is desired is then carried out through the displacement of the energy field of rockness from finity to a dimension which we may conveniently call simply infinity. In this way, that which is required is accomplished due to the cooperation of the infinite understanding of the Creator indwelling in the living rock. This is, of course, the mechanism by which many things are accomplished which are not subject to your present means of physical analysis of action at a distance. So this is really cool. So when basically Ra is saying, this is basically Ra is talking about controlling things via the mind, and talking about how this is established by understanding and manipulating the underlying fabric, the energy fabric of reality, rather than looking at it materially. And Ra says this is accomplished, and many things are accomplished through a mechanism which basically you don't understand, which they say, which are not subject to your present means of physical analysis of action at a distance. So action at a distance is quantum entanglement. So when Ra refers to action at a distance, it's because Einstein called this phenomenon spooky action at a distance. So basically what this means is that when particles are entangled, they can communicate with each other instantaneously. And that basically breaks the idea that reality is physical, because if reality is physical, you can't have instant communication. Something has to travel physically to pass information from one thing to the next. A signal has to go through. But if things happen instantaneously, that means that something's happening behind the scenes. So basically what Ra is saying is that this happens by a means which your physicists are trying to explain spooky action at a distance, or they didn't say spooky, but action at a distance through physical means. Basically, like, that's wrong. Like, it's not going to work. It happens through a mechanism that physics is misinterpreting. And this is, like, physics does misinterpret it. It's quantum entanglement happens non-locally. When particles are entangled, it's not through any physical communication or physical signal being sent. So anyway, really cool that Ra mentions like a quantum mechanics aspect here. So Don says, if an individual is totally informed with respect to the law of one and lives and is the law of one, such things as the building of a pyramid by direct mental effort would be commonplace. Is that what I am to understand? Am I correct? So basically what Don is saying is like, hey, if you have someone who's extremely conscious, like beyond what any human is now, and understands the law of one, lives the law of one, and is the law of one, like understands what reality is reality, like knows all this stuff. Basically, Don is saying, if someone has reached that level, does that mean that they could build a pyramid simply through the mind, through mental effort? Don says, is that right? And Ra says, I am Ra. You are incorrect. So Ra goes, no. You misunderstood. You are incorrect. You are incorrect, wrong, in that there is a distinction between the individual power through the law of one and the combined or societal memory complex, mind, body, spirit understanding of the law of one. So Ra is saying you're wrong here, because there's a difference between an individual with that level of consciousness and a group with that level of consciousness. In the first case, only the one individual, purified of all flaws, So in the first case, only the one individual purified of all flaws could move a mountain. So basically they're saying, if you had an individual who was like perfect or godlike, essentially, they could move a mountain. Figuratively speaking, like make changes in reality via the mind. But Ra says, in the case of mass understanding of unity, like a collective, each individual may contain an acceptable amount of distortion, and yet the mass mind could move mountains. So basically, Ra is saying, for an individual to be able to make changes in reality like that through the mind, they have to perfectly understand existence, like completely. But if you have a society, a group, a mass, if they're working together, if they all understand a decent amount of it, then collectively as a group, they can begin to make changes. The progress is normally from the understanding, which you now seek to a dimension of understanding, which is governed by the laws of love and which seeks the laws of light. Those who are vibrating with the law of light seek the law of one. Those who vibrate with the law of one seek the law of foreverness. We cannot say what is beyond the dissolution of the unified self with all that there is, for we still seek to become all that there is, and still are we Ra. Thus our paths go onward. And okay, so let's pause here. I want to take a minute. This is a really interesting thing to think about. And this is another cool thing that I like, is Ra is basically saying here, that they're on a journey too, and that there are things that they don't understand. And I think that this is important because, remember, we don't know if this is real or if it's made up or if it's a manifestation of the unconscious. However, if it, let's say, for argument's sake, let's say that it is real. If it is real, it's important to understand that Ra doesn't know everything. And Ra is saying Ra doesn't know everything. And because Ra doesn't know everything, guess what? Ra can be wrong about things. So I think that's always important. And why material like this is always, it's a good exercise in metacognition to be very critical. You don't want to believe stuff just because, oh, some entity said it's true. You don't know. That entity might be wrong. That entity might be evil and trying to trick people. And of course, it might all be made up, or it might just be a manifestation of the unconscious. So we have to be highly critical. And Ra is basically saying those who reach the law of one, right? Those who understand the law of one, which Ra is claiming to understand the law of one because they're a message of the law of one. Once you understand the law of one, you seek the law of foreverness. And Ra is saying we basically can't say what goes beyond the dissolution of the unified self with the all that there is, for we still seek to become all that there is. See, this is really cool. So what Ra's mission is for them, right? They're trying to transmit the law of one to Earth, but for them personally, they're trying to reach this law of foreverness, which is to become all that there is. They're seeking to become all that there is. It says, for we still seek to become all that there is, and still are we Ra. Thus our paths go onward. So we're trying to be all that there is, but we're still Ra, basically. Like we're trying to get there. And again, very, very interesting because this comports quite nicely with the Neogenian idea of reality being absolute mind formed by Zedic minds that are individuals, then eventually form what we call a sub-network mind, which is a group mind. And then eventually what happens is that group minds will interact and eventually seek to become the all that there is, the absolute network, which would be a network of networks forming the absolute network. So it's interesting in that, again, not exactly the same, but very interesting. Definitely not exactly the same, but very interesting that Ra hits on certain themes that are very compatible with how we understand existence to be. Now, one thing that I want to say real quick here, again, with the ability of controlling, making things change, objects change with your mind. Like, is that possible? Does that comport as well? Well, here's the thing. So when we reach the level of a subnetwork mind, right? When that's phase 3 of reality. Now, this is according to the Neogenian system, okay? Our system, the Neogenian system, meta-rationalism. This is not law of one. So according to our system, when zetas, eternal minds, reach a level where they're in phase 3 of existence, we are basically becoming a group mind. We're becoming a subnetwork mind, which is a network of minds. So we become when we're that synchronized, we no longer rely on physical reality. We create our own dimension. And then within our own dimension, it's like our universe, and it's our universe, and it's composed of only our frequencies, so we can create whatever we will by thought, because it's our world and our frequencies in our universe. However, this universe, the holos, is not ours. There are a vast multiplicity of Zedic minds. This holos is like the community pool. It's the default. It's the public server. The holos, the physical reality, is a reality created by the frequencies of all minds in existence, all zetas in existence. So it's not our frequencies to change, not all of it. So when you go to sleep and dream at night, you can change things by thinking about them, because that's a world created from your frequencies. The physical reality is a world created by all of our collective frequencies, not just Earth, all minds in existence. So the reason why we can't change things by thinking about it is because it's not all our frequencies to control. However, Ra is saying that if an individual were absolutely perfect, they would be able to make changes in this reality. But of course, that's really unobtainable, being so perfect. However, they're saying if you have a mass of highly conscious yet not perfect individuals, then they can make changes. So the question is here, is that possible? Well, the answer is maybe. So the thing is if you think about it like kind of like a tapestry, imagine reality is a tapestry and each one of us contributes a thread. Well, since we're just one thread, we can't really make that many changes. But if we're a group of threads, well, and we control those threads, well, we can kind of start to change things. But we can't change everything because we're just the threads that are on Earth. We're not all the threads. We're, let's say, if the threads were, we'd be like 10 threads or something if it was, I don't know how many threads are in a tapestry, but you get what I mean. We're just a small number of threads. However, we can control the threads that we have. So the question is, either there are two possible scenarios. Either we just cannot make changes to physical reality via the mind because we don't have enough capacity to. We literally have to create a new dimension to be able to start doing things like that. That's one option. The other option is that it is perhaps possible if you become highly developed in consciousness, synchronicity, and possibly technology as well to augment things, augment consciousness, etc., that we perhaps when we work together make localized changes. So we could perhaps, like Ra is saying, move bricks, manipulate items, blocks, bricks, whatever, things like that, create certain things through the manipulation of frequencies. But you wouldn't be able to alter the universe because that's, it's not our frequencies to do. So it's a possibility that at a very, very high level of evolution, mental evolution and synchronization, that we may be able to make localized changes like that through group efforts. So that might be somewhere around phase 2, planetary civilization, when we start learning how to do that. Then eventually, we're able to make localized change. We can change things on Earth, let's say, here and there, start to manipulate in a certain way. But then we ultimately become a subnetwork mind and create our own dimension where we have control over our entire universe. So do you see how the difference, it would kind of be like an upgrade. First, we're just humans. We can't change anything unless we physically, change them. Then maybe we develop as a group the ability to make certain changes on Earth when we're highly evolved and conscious, and then we evolve to a subnetwork mind where we can completely create our own universe in our own dimension, or what we call a CFD, a collective frequency domain. So it's interesting. So again, in our system, it's kind of an open question. It's either we can't make significant changes in the physical until we create our own CFD and then can make changes there, or through highly developed consciousness, through highly perhaps technology to augment things and working together, we might be able to make localized changes on Earth. So interesting to think about. It's sort of up in the air and see, this is the thing, and this is why we need to have meta-rationalism implemented instead of just physicalist science, so we can start studying these things and creating hyper-aware technology that is directed via hyper-awareness to augment consciousness and augment our goals with regard to creating a new Earth, a new humanity, a new life, and that involves exploring consciousness. So and studying these things to see if these things are possible. When we have meta-rationalism established, we will have meta-rationalists working on this stuff to see if it's possible, and if so, how we can begin to access it. So really interesting idea to think about. But it is cool that it does make a decent amount of sense that a group absolutely would be able to, because their frequency contributions would be collective and more impactful than rather just, again, if you see a tapestry, if you just alter one thread, it's not going to change the tapestry much. If you alter 30 threads or whatever, you're going to start to see some changes, but you can't alter all of them. Anyway, let's continue. I know I go off on tangents, but this is really interesting stuff. So I know I'm on a tangent, but again, do you see how even if See, this is why I like this material. Because again, it doesn't matter if it's real or if it's a hoax or if it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious. It's really interesting, and it gets the mind working. It gets the mind thinking about these things, using concept networking, using metacognition, examining it critically. Could this really happen? Couldn't this really happen? How would it work? Would it work? Would it not work? Interesting stuff to think about. Okay. So anyway, Ra left it off by saying, you know, they're trying to become all that there is, but they haven't yet. They're still Ra, which is really cool. And if I were Don, I would ask more about that. But Don asks about pyramids, and I get kind of frustrated because Don is a physicalist, not a physicalist. He's definitely not a physicalist. Don is a physicist and engineer, and sometimes the questions Don asks are just like, why would you like you could ask about like this aspect of the nature of reality, and you're asking like how these bricks got moved? Like, come on. Anyway, Don sometimes frustrates me with the questions that he chooses, but still, Don seems like a highly intelligent guy. But Don is a little naive, I will say, because Don has been, in my opinion, duped by certain things in the past. In my opinion, but we won't get into that there. I talked about that a little bit in the first video in this series. So. But anyway, I like Don. Don seems like a interesting person. So Don says, was the pyramid then built by the mutual action of many of your people? So remember, Ra has like incarnated on Earth. I think at this point, Ra has incarnated. At a certain point, Ra left and just only communicated through channeling. But anyway, was the pyramid then built by the mutual action of many of your people? Ra responds, I am Ra. The pyramids, which we thought built, were constructed from thought forms created by our social memory complex. So really, we as a social memory complex constructed it via thought forms. So Don says, then the rock was created by thought in place rather than moved from somewhere else. Is that correct? So Don is saying, was the rocks created, or so Don says, so the rocks were just like manifested rather than moving rocks from one place to another. And one might wonder, like, how are rocks manifested? Of course, it wouldn't be magic. This would be like manipulating frequencies to combine to create a structure that one wanted to create. It wouldn't obviously just be like poof. It would be about manipulating the frequencies to actually create a structure that one wanted, with, you know, and that would manifest as a molecular structure into the form. Anyway, Don's saying, hey, did you make these from thought or did you move them? Ra responds, I am Ra. We built with everlasting rock, the Great Pyramid, as you call it. Other of the pyramids were built with stone moved from one place to another. So Ra says, with the Great Pyramid, we built it with everlasting rock, but the other pyramids were built with stone moved from one place to another. And Don goes, what is everlasting rock? What is that? That sounds like something from Willy Wonka. He didn't say that. But what is everlasting rock? Ra responds, I am Ra. If you can understand the concept of thought forms, you will realize that the thought form is more regular in its distortion than the energy fields created by the materials in the rock, which has been created through thought form from thought to finite energy and beingness in, shall we say, distorted reflection of the level of the thought form. May we answer you in any more helpful way. So basically, Ra is saying that the rocks that one is able to manifest like through thought form creation is more regular. It's more precise. And Don says, this is slightly trivial, but I was wondering why, in that case, the pyramid was made of many blocks rather than the whole thing being created at once. So Don is going, hey, if you can build things through thought, why did you build it brick by brick or rock by rock? Why didn't you just do the entire pyramid at one time? And Ra says, I am Ra. There is a law which we believe to be one of the more significant primal distortions of the law of one. That is the law of confusion. You have called this the law of free will. We wish to make a healing machine, or a healing machine, or time-space ratio complex, which was as efficacious as possible. However, we did not desire to allow the mystery to be penetrated by the peoples in such a way that we became worshipped as builders of a miraculous pyramid. Thus, it appears to be made, not thought. So eventually, essentially what Ra is saying is, we wanted to create this technology to be a healing device. And we wanted it to be as effective as possible. But what we didn't want to happen was for people to worship us as being builders of a miraculous pyramid. So they're basically saying, if we just, formed a pyramid, we would be worshipped as gods. And that's not what we're trying to do, which is kind of ironic, because the Egyptian, all the gods and, the gods of Ra and all that. That's why Ra's kind of pissed, because Ra's like, you distorted our message, God damn it. Anyway, Ra's saying the reason why we didn't build the pyramid all at once and we did it brick by brick is because we didn't want people to worship us as building for doing a miracle. So it appears to be made, not thought. And finally, here it says, well, then you speak of the pyramid, especially the Great Pyramid, I assume, as primarily a healing machine, and also spoke of it as a device of initiation. Are these one and the same concepts? Because remember, Ra says, hey, it's initiation to bring people to higher consciousness, and also as a device, a piece of technology that uses crystal structures to interact with these highly conscious beings, and then have these pyramids across the world to create like a ring of energy and consciousness, etc. So Ra and Don is saying, is the initiation and the healing device the same thing? Are they the same concept? Ra says they are part of one complex of love, light, intent sharing. To use the healing aspects properly, it was important to have a purified and dedicated channel or energy for the love light of the infinite creator to flow through. Thus, the initiatory method was necessary to prepare the mind, the body, and the spirit for service in the creator's work. The two are integral. Quick couple things I have to mention. When Ra is talking about the creator, Ra is not talking about the creator in the sense of like the Bible, God creator in the sky. Ra refers to the creator as the one mind of which we are all a part of. Now, in our system, in the Neogenian, the absolute is the one mind, and we literally are the absolute. We're the individual nodes, the zetas, and we are the network coming to consciousness of itself as the absolute mind. So the absolute in our system isn't any kind of God apart from us in any way. It is what we are, and we are coming to consciousness through our understanding of what we are, where we are, and why we are here. Ra's idea is similar, but different. Ra's is definitely different. It has more of, we'll get into it later because I want to continue this, but it's not exactly the same, but it is similar. And these differences, by the way, are extremely important. And that's one of the things I want to stress again, like, I don't agree with everything that Ra says. I'm very skeptical of a lot of things. Certain things I just flat out disagree with. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. Let's continue. It says, does the shape of the pyramid itself, is that a key function in the initiation process? Ra says, this is a large question. We feel that we shall begin and ask you to reevaluate and ask further at a later session this somewhat, shall we say, informative point. By the way, I want to say real quick, I forgot to mention, Ra in the previous question was basically saying that, hey, in order to operate this technology, that uses crystals and whatnot, and what this technology that we're building in the pyramids. In order for this to be operated, it has to be operated by someone who's very conscious, or that is a purified, dedicated channel or energizer. It couldn't be, that's why the pyramids were twofold: one, to initiate an individual as an energizer or channeler, and then the actual mechanism and machinery itself that would interface with that channeler and be able to operate it. Because Ra is saying that not anyone can just do this. It has to be an extremely highly conscious being and understanding how to operate this technology, basically. So anyway, Don says, hey, does the shape of the pyramid matter? Ra says, to begin, there are two main functions of the pyramid in relation to the initiatory procedures. One has to do with the body. Before the body can be initiated, the mind must be initiated. This is the point at which most adepts of your present cycle find their mind-body-spirit complexes distorted from. When the character and personality, that is the true identity of the mind, has been discovered, the body then must be known in each and every way. Thus, the various functions of the body need understanding and control with detachment. The first use of the pyramid, then, is the going down into the pyramid for purposes of deprivation of sensory input, so that the body may, in a sense, be dead and another life begins. So this is really interesting. They're basically saying that, hey, the body and mind have to be initiated. And the problem that your people have right now is a distortion of the mind. And this is the big problem that your people have, basically. And you have to find the character and identity and personality, or the true identity of the mind. So this is bypassing the ego, basically. Bypassing the ego, bypassing the, in our system, right, we have a triadic mode of consciousness in hyper-awareness. This is the avatar, zedic, and absolute modes of consciousness. Most people are stuck in the avatar mode of consciousness. And this is essentially what Ra is saying. Your people are stuck in the avatar mode of consciousness. They associate themselves with the particular life that they're living right now, their egoic consciousness, and the body that they have. That's who they identify with themselves. And remember, this is all my interpretation, of course, as well. But that's what I believe Ra is saying. And basically, one of the purposes here is to get people to realize that they are not their bodies, that they're not their egos, and discover their true self, or what they say, the true character and personality that is the true identity of the mind. Now, in our system, this is about going to the zedic perspective. So the avatar perspective is just you as an individual mind. I'm sorry, you as an individual body and your egoic personality. This is what basically the mode that everyone operates in. Oh, my name is this, I have this job, it's confined to your current life and your body, etc. Going to the zeta or zedic mode of consciousness is switching to a mode of understanding that you are an eternal being that exists across space and time. You've had many lifetimes. Your ego is not who you truly are. It's just a particular tool for this lifetime. You are an infinite and eternal being that exists across multiple lifetimes and is eternal and spans and exists in a non-local domain, is beyond space and time, exists in the frequency domain. So this is the zedic perspective. And this requires a new structure in the psyche, a zedic analog. Just like self-awareness requires an analog I, requires a zedic analog. And then finally, you have the absolute perspective in our system, which is going to the perspective of the network, being now I realize that not only am I an individual zeta, but I am in a zeta within a zedic configuration. That is, I exist within an interconnected network of other zetas. And from this level, I understand that I am in a network, and that also I am the absolute coming to consciousness through me and my understanding of what I am. So that is the absolute, which requires the development of another structure in the psyche, the analog all. And remember, this is not like, yeah, anyway, my point, see, this is when we get into like meta-rationalism and things like this. This stuff is to be studied rigorously, right? This is not just like new agey, oh, what's enlightenment? Oh, it's about having an abundance mindset or whatever. It's vague stuff that doesn't mean anything. No, this is serious. Literally developing new structures of the psyche to switch between modes of consciousness. Right now, humans have an analog I. This was a term coined by Julian Jaynes. It's basically the ego. You have to develop a new structure, a Zedic analog, which is gives one the ability to switch to the Zedic mode of consciousness, which understands us as you understand yourself as an eternal being, then an absolute, then an analog all, which allows one to switch to the absolute mode of consciousness, which realizes that we are an individual within an interconnected network, but in a certain sense, we are the all coming to consciousness. We are the network coming to consciousness of itself through each other. And in that sense, we're all reflections of each other, as we are all the network coming to consciousness of ourselves through the various nodes, Zedic nodes of reality. Okay. So anyway, long story short, I was explaining the Neogenian perspective on hyper-awareness and these different levels of consciousness. Long story short, basically what Ra is saying, the process of the pyramid is to get people to break people from the avatar mode of perspective, to get people to stop associating with their ego and their body. And one way to do this, says the first use of the pyramid, is going down into the pyramid for sensory deprivation, so that the body may, in a sense, be dead and another life begin. You know, this process of death and rebirth, which is a very important theme in Egyptian and just in general, death and rebirth, you're going to find that everywhere. And this is why we have a process of, in our system, the process of neogenesis, which is about casting one's old self, so they may rebuild their new self anew. And become master of their own mind and controllers of their own mind, rather than having been controlled by like societal influences or cultural brainwashing or any of that BS. But anyway, what Ra is saying is that one can go down into this mode to have sensory deprivation, so that one can disassociate from the body. That's when it said, in a sense, be dead and another life begin. Not being literal, of course, but meaning, in that process of sensory deprivation, having this transformation of consciousness where one has that realization of, oh, I am more than my body. And people this happens with people who do sensory deprivation or do deep meditation or do psychedelics. Like all this, this is very, very common. Remember, when it comes to psychedelics, don't do anything dangerous, don't do anything illegal, and never feel pressured. But I just always say that because I don't want people, yeah, you get it. Anyway, so really, really interesting. Now, let me tell you, so the question is, right? I want to know, okay. So first of all, here's also, I want to add something to this. I believe as well that an important function of the pyramids, and this is my belief, and I believe that the function of the pyramids, and I don't remember if this is in the Law of One anywhere. I don't think that it is. I've read so many different material that I can't remember for this, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that it's not. But what I believe was an important function of the pyramids, whether it was on purpose or not, okay? So here's the question, right? Like, is this real? Is this not? Were the pyramids really built by an entity called Ra through thought forms and whatnot? Maybe. Regardless, what I think occurred was that the pyramids were built by higher minds. That is, minds that were highly conscious. Now, does that mean it was literally a social memory complex and used thought to create it? I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. What I believe is that highly conscious minds constructed the pyramids for the purpose, yes, of increasing consciousness. Now, was it for like creating this crystal network across the globe to create this? I don't know. But I believe it was for the purpose of increasing consciousness, and I believe it was for initiatory processes. And I also believe that the pyramids themselves, whether this was intentionally done or not, but I would think that it was probably intentionally done. I believe that the pyramids themselves affected a shift in consciousness in the people. And here's why. Because you have to remember, this is thousands and thousands of years ago. Self-awareness is fairly fresh. And there aren't, like today, we have skyscrapers and massive buildings everywhere. Back then, not so much. You just had, smaller buildings, constructions. Now imagine not really seeing anything like that, like just having small huts and houses and dwelling places and things like this. Then imagine coming across, like seeing that for the first time, a pyramid built. Not anything built by nature, but built through the power of will. Now, I don't mean like literally manifesting, but being like, okay, we as human beings can create this. Whether it's by manifesting through the mind or literally just putting blocks together. It's we as humans have the ability to have nature conform to our will. We will move mountains by building a mountain. And so what happens is this affects a change in consciousness. When a human encounters that, they're like, whoa. And whether they consciously realize it or not, or it just happens unconsciously, what happens is they go, wow, we have the ability to create, to transform, to build a world. We can create mountains. Nature doesn't. We can be the creators of nature. Like before, nature is something that is either good to you or bad to you. You can have a good harvest, or you can have earthquakes or tornadoes or disasters that you're very much thrown around by nature. But coming across a pyramid would affect a change in consciousness, whether unconscious or conscious, where a being goes, wow, we have the power to create. We are creators. Now today, it's very commonplace to see like skyscrapers and stuff like that. So it's not that big of a deal. But imagine never seeing something like that at all and coming across it and go, whoa, we have the power to create. And this kickstarts the development of consciousness, because then we realize we can build things, we can create things, we can transform things. And then eventually this leads to higher and higher consciousness where we're at now. And what we're trying to get people to realize in raising consciousness is we are literally the building blocks of existence. We create this reality itself through our frequency contributions, and we can create our own worlds. And so do you see how it starts by, we can put things together and transform and create. And then we start building technology, and then we start realizing what reality is. And we realize that reality is frequency. Then we realize we can manipulate this frequency. Then we realize we can synchronize together to augment our power, and then ultimately establish our own dimension and not have to, or CFD as we call it, and not have to rely on physicality anymore. Do you see how it kickstarts that process of just the realization that we are creators, we have the power to conform reality to our will, not the other way around, not reality happening to us, but we being reality and changing and altering. So in my opinion, the pyramids were created by highly conscious individuals that wanted to affect a change in consciousness, and through initiatory processes in the pyramid itself. And whether it was intentionally done or not, I think it would probably be intentionally done to affect a change in mass consciousness by encountering the pyramids and being just so stunned by its power and realizing the power that we have on an unconscious or conscious level. So again, that's what I believe. Now, was it actually created by, so here's what I want to know from you guys. I want to know what you think. So I asked you in the beginning, all right, there's a couple things I want to know from you guys in the comments. First, I want to know, do you think this is real? Do you think this is made up in a hoax? Or do you think it's a manifestation of Carla's unconscious? That's what I want to know. And then what else I want to know, if you, which kind of goes hand in hand, so you can put it in the same comment. I want to know if you think that the pyramids were built, like Ross says, with the mind, or if you think it was done through moving blocks physically. So really interesting, very interesting stuff to ponder, very interesting things to think about. And remember, always be self-critical or critical of the material. Don't just believe everything you hear, but it's very, very interesting things to think about. And we are definitely going to continue this. There's 187 sessions and such interesting concepts to think about. So tell me what you think in the comments. Do you think it's real? Do you think it was built through the mind, or do you think it was built through just humans working? Regardless of the case, to me, like Rock kind of says, ultimately, I don't think that it matters whether it was done or not. It was the effect that it had, and I believe that if people marvel at its grandeur today, it's still affecting consciousness today. Like, think about the power that the pyramids still have the power to affect consciousness today, not by emanating some field, but because of their archetypal symbolic power of just creating awe and transformation through their mystery, through their grandeur, through their magnificence. So anyway, tell me what you think. Check out my other videos on the Law of One. I'm going to have a video pop up on the intro video I did on this, and then the playlist where we actually examine them. I highly recommend you check out the intro one if you haven't, because it explains all this real quick. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon. It helps out a lot. You get access to all our members only videos, new members only video every week. We just did one beyond What's Beyond the Quantum Realm. Really cool video. I really enjoyed it. You can do that by getting any tier on Patreon, or tier 2 or higher on YouTube by hitting the join button. Also, I always want to say, as I always do, I never want anyone to feel pressured to support monetarily. You don't have to. Absolutely not. Only do it if you feel good about it and you're in a good, financial state and you're happy to do it. Don't feel pressured or anything like that. There are plenty of free ways you can support, like liking, subscribing, and sharing my videos helps a lot. I want to give a big shout out over to everyone who does support on Patreon, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, Fairies of Venus, DB, William, Enki, Jose, and everyone else. Thank you very much.